Well, the position of the government has always been to try and work with the GFA to satisfy the UEFA requirements. And of course, we've got a football stadium at Victoria Stadium, and that was the position from which we would all, I imagine, part, wanting to play there, especially if there is to be a national stadium for the GFA in the future. Whilst that stadium is developed, why not be able to play at Victoria and not have to travel to Faro or anywhere else? And that has always been the government and the GFA's position. And it has always consistently been UEFa's position, as far as the government has understood, that it is not possible to play those competitive matches at Victoria for all of the technical reasons that have been expressed in the past. And as far as the government is concerned, that has not yet changed.
According to the opposition, and Mr. Feetham was telling me yesterday, the government has known since the beginning of this year, in fact, that Gibraltar might be able to have a 5,000-seater stadium and still host international UEFA matches. Is that true?
No, it isn't. As much of what Mr. Feetham says, it's all based on speculation and not revealing sources, not telling us who his experts are that advise of all the dangers of LNG that the government's experts don't advise on, and all the other information that Mr. Feetham wants to put out in the public domain without making himself responsible for the source of his information. What the government has done, and it has done it in partnership with the GFA, is to assess the level of concern there has been in the community about the initial proposals for Europa, and try and see whether those concerns can be taken on board, whether there can be mitigation of the plans proposed. And the GFA in particular has been pursuing that with UEFA. There has been huge controversy in the newspaper pages in Gibraltar, with different people who understand football writing about the UEFA statutes and what they mean, and the GFA putting different positions. But look, the GFA is in contact with UEFA, and its communications with UEFA are what they convey to us. To date, there has been no change in the UEFA requirements, but it is true to say that the GFA, encouraged by the government of Gibraltar, and by me in particular, are taking into consideration the concerns of the public, which means trying to reduce the size of the stadium, ergo trying to reduce the number of people who would be seated in such a stadium, and in that way perhaps mitigate the effect of the stadium on Europa Point.
But to be clear, the intention is not that if UEFA comes back with its report and says that a 5,000-seater stadium would be suitable, if they were to come back with that, we're not saying, Gibraltar isn't saying that we don't need to proceed with the Europa Point stadium.
Not necessarily. It's very likely that what we're talking about is a Europa Point stadium that will be much smaller than the sort of stadium that people saw in the process that the GFA submitted itself to. And I want to just remind people that what the GFA did was say to the community, here is what we propose, please give us your feedback. And the feedback was not universally positive. And they went then to a DPC, which is now, of course, an open process when people can put their complaints, and where even the chairman of the GSD was able to attend and put his own concerns, as did other members of the public, and indicate that they felt that this was too big a stadium for whatever reasons at Europa. So it's the mitigation of those concerns that drives the GFA, and the government with the GFA, supporting the GFA, to try and see whether it is possible to marry the concept of a stadium at Europa Point, which is a GFA national stadium, with the concerns of people of what the original plans looked like.
So the government is still backing and would still make the land available to the GFA for a stadium at Europa Point?
Yes, and it's very easy when you're in opposition to say whatever you like and to pretend that you will be the panacea that will resolve the difficult subject that is land in Gibraltar and where things fit, etc. Look, if the GFA were to say to the government, we need a stadium that seats 5 people, then we have different options. If they say we need a stadium that fits 5,000 people or less, or 8,000 people, then the size of the stadium revolves necessarily around that. And where you put the stadium depends on those issues.
The opposition has accused you of putting this issue on the back burner because you don't want to raise it before the general election. What's your response to that?
Well, look, the opposition accused me of all sorts of things all of the time, none of which are true. I do not have a back burner. When people see the way that I have pursued delivery of the GSLP Liberal Manifesto, the most ambitious manifesto that the general public have ever had put to them in a general election, they will see that we do not do back burners, we do afterburners. We go faster, not slower.
Okay, but what is the government's position in relation to this issue? If it hasn't been resolved before the election takes place, what will you say about it in your manifesto?
Well, look, we have been consistently honest and transparent about this. We want to help the GFA to have a national stadium for Gibraltar football. With the criteria that we have at the moment, it fits only at Europa Point. With the criteria we may have in the future, it may still likely only fit at Europa Point, but the profile of the place may be completely different, and those who have concerns about it today may not have it in the future. Mr. Feetham believes that this is an important issue. He has said to many people he thinks this is the one issue that might actually tip the election in his favour. Well, at least he thinks there's one issue that might tip it in his favour. I think the people of Gibraltar are far too sensible not to want to look at a whole programme and to understand what it is that is being put to them by different parties at the general election. We will continue to work with the GFA to make sure that we can deliver for Gibraltar a new national stadium in the right location. And before, during and after the general election campaign, that will be our position. It's transparent, it's the right position for Gibraltar, and it's the right position for Gibraltar football.